buying in a beautiful century home, did you know that every house, depending on the decade it's built in, comes with its own advantages and unique challenges? Join us as we do a special series with Andrew McCarthy from InView Home Inspections, where we're going to go through the decades. We're going to look at all the houses from century-old homes right up to modern new builds. You're not going to want to miss this one. There's some great information. Andrew McCarthy's got some great tips for every new home buyer. Welcome back to another episode of the Mortgage Strategy Show. We're here today. We've got Andrew McCarthy, InView Home Inspections. We've got a really, really cool topic today. There's different houses. When you're looking looking at houses, there's unique features for every house depending on when they were bought. So what we're going to do over the next few episodes, we're going to go through the centuries or through the decades and kind of break down maybe some of the things that you should be looking for, and maybe if you're looking at that home, some of the things you should be aware of. So really excited to have you on today, Andrew, and we're going to start right at the beginning. So we're going to talk about some of those old century homes. So I'm sure you see lots of these when you're out doing those home inspections. If I'm out looking at that century home, what's the first thing that maybe I need to look at?
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me on. Century homes, we typically think of those houses as pre-1925. People have different opinions about that. I consider century as pre-1925. They are very, not all the time, but they are attractive homes. In that time period, we switched from Victorian to Edwardian. Victorian ended around 1910, and we switched to Edwardian post 1910. Those houses are actually quite different. Victorian was very ornate, lots of crown molding, lots of corbelling everywhere. They switched to Edwardian, which was more of a modern take, very straight lines. We lost the crown molding. We lost all the corbels, but it has some other pretty cool features. We actually have an Edwardian home, my wife and I, and we love the architecture. The Victorian was a little too old for us. Edwardian just kind of hit the spot.
Right. So a lot of cool different features. So I guess, a lot of people are attracted to that old, they like the old, like you said, the Edwardian or the Victorian home of, for a lot of the looks, right? A lot of those, architecture that goes into some of those houses, but mechanically, there's obviously going to be some differences. Those houses were built 100 years ago. They're older homes, and not to say that, any house doesn't have its issue, right? You could buy a house that was built yesterday that's going to have challenges, maybe sometimes more challenges than the old one. But if I'm going in and I'm looking at those houses, and obviously we're going to bring you into as our expert, but what are maybe some of those things that I should be aware of, mechanically or some of those challenges that these houses could have?
Yeah. So as I said, a lot of people buy these century homes because of the cool look and the character. Things aren't always as cool as they look. When you start going through a century house, you start to realize that these are not perfect. We build more with a mindset of science and technology today. Back then, we just built with brute force. That's why those houses are still standing. That's why this wall behind me is 115 years old and there's not a crack in it. It's a lot different than a newer house. The things, though, that you do have to think about, and this is something I always talk to my clients about, when you buy an older home, an old house, you must always remember that the materials they used, yes, they were different. They were, in my opinion, a lot more lasting, a lot more stronger, lasting longer than what you get today. But you've also got a lot of different people living in there over the years. You've got the family where the guy thinks he's a plumber and he's done his plumbing. The guy who thinks he's an electrician, he's done his electrical work. and now you're buying all those people's handiwork.
Right.
So in this house here that we live in, we bought it as a fixer-upper, and we knew it was.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I always tell my clients is when you start renovating an old house, and the phrase we use is peeling back the layers, it starts to show its true colors. And this house was no exception. You have to understand that these houses were not built to the codes that we have today. I'm not going to say they were thrown up without any rules, without any regulations, because they were, but we don't have the modern day codes. Modern day codes aren't always a good thing.
Right.
I find houses today, in the simplest term I can use is they are weaker. They are weaker houses than what we have 100 years ago. But you do have to be mindful about things that are still in the house that have not been updated. The electrical wiring is a big deal. I see knob and tube electrical wiring all the time, and this is a fire hazard. I see plumbing that you don't want today. I've seen plumbing that, whether it's a supply plumbing or a waste plumbing, the materials we used to use, you don't want them today. This is an area where you do want modern day science and technology behind you. Plumbing, you're going to see a lot of galvanized steel plumbing. That's a no-no. You don't want that. Galvanized steel will be your supply piping. It's a pretty awful material to have. It rusts from the inside out.
Right.
It affects your water flow throughout the house.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a lead water main coming into the house. And I don't need to say more about lead water main. You don't want that.
You do not.
It's not the character you want. You want that changed out. You also have cast iron waste pipes. We had cast iron in this house, and it was an $11,000 fix to get rid of it. And it's something we had to do. But thankfully, I knew that when we bought it, and we budgeted for that. So, all in all, the house is very cool looking. Lots of character, but there are some things you want new. So in a nutshell, you want new electrical, and you want new plumbing, and you want new HVAC. HVAC is your heating, your air conditioning, and your ventilation. Those are the things you want new. And windows. Now, windows, a little bit different. We've got a couple of windows in this house. No, they are not efficient. Are they beautiful? Yes, and that's why we have them, because they are Edwardian windows. The
Right.
other windows we've changed. And that was the first thing we did when we took possession of this house. We changed all the windows except for these two particular windows that we kept. So we wanted the
And I imagine
character over
insulation, right?
efficiency.
Yeah, because that's going to change your insulation and your heating, and you talk about that heating
Yeah,
and cooling bills. The windows and the insulation of when you get that old farmhouse. I know I've got buddies of mine that have the old farmhouse that they loved, but it's cold, right? It's hard to
yeah,
heat sometimes, right? So
yes, it
it's
is.
definitely some of the things that we want to be aware of, and you want to,
Yeah,
some of the updates that you want to do. Some might be, make it look better, might add some of that value, but some of those, like you said, a lot of those updates are going to be to replace the plumbing, to replace some of the electrical.
yeah. I always say to my clients, whether it's a new house or an old house, and the cutoff point when inspectors call it a new house and an old house varies.
Right.
An old house to me, in my opinion, is 1960 and older. After 1960, it's a newer house.
Right.
Now, part of the century homes is the heating system. We in this house, we have radiators. and we had to make a decision. Do you want your radiators to work? They look great,
Right.
but you want them to work, and we certainly did. So we put the money into getting our radiators working again. It's the cool factor. It's the old cast iron, very ornate radiators that are working now, and that's our primary heat source. But you don't have air conditioning.
No,
Because you
there's not a
cannot
lot.
have air conditioning with
No, you cannot.
radiators.
No, you cannot. They're not built to
And
pump cold air.
yeah, and back in the day, there was no such thing as air conditioning. Um, today we love our air conditioning. We all do, and we purchase air conditioning units for this house. It's called the mini split system.
Right.
Mini split system is an electric way of providing air conditioning. So we, again, going back to what I said a minute ago, we have the luxury of the modern day air conditioning, but we also have the character and the like I said, the cool factor of working radiators.
What else is lots of cool stuff there, right? Like the heating, like that you need to know before you get into that century home, built before 1925. What about renovations? What if I want to buy that? Like you talk about a basement, right? The basements
Yeah,
weren't built the same way back then. What if I want
no,
to take that basement and turn it into a living space? What are some challenges that you might come across there?
yeah, it isn't a good idea to
Mhm.
take a century home and try and finish the basement. And there's a reason for that. Back when these houses were built, we didn't even call them basements. We called them cellars. And a lot of old century homes have stone foundations. Now,
Right.
these stone foundations are just what it sounds like. They're foundations made of stone. That's all they are. And the worst thing you can do is try and turn that cellar into a livable space. There are ways to do it, very, very expensive. You can do a damp proofing around the perimeter of the house,
Mhm.
but you'll also find a lot of century homes. There isn't a lot of room between houses because, again, back in the day, they didn't provide a lot of space between houses. So you've got the cost of damp proofing or waterproofing your stone foundation. You've also got the challenge of getting equipment between houses.
Right. Right.
Now, these cellars or basements, they leak. And when these houses were built, people used those cellars for storage. That's all it was. They didn't think about, I want to put a home theater in my basement 100
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
So we're expecting a lot from our basements that is an unfair want. These basements cannot provide you living space like they do today. These basements leaked. They leaked, and these people went on with their lives. You get a bit of water in the basement, it
Oh
dries
wow.
out, you move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And this house is no different. Our basement leaks,
Right.
and it is what it is. My shop is in the basement. I'm an avid woodworker, and I know where it leaks, and I know how the rain has to be. And when it's going to leak, I put a towel down, soaps up the trickle of water, and I move on with my life.
Right. Probably not
So,
something you want to have a home theater in, though.
no, the worst thing, in my opinion, and just my opinion, the worst thing you can do is finish a basement in a century home.
Excellent. No, some really, really good stuff there. So if you're out looking for that century home, definitely take some of the pointers that Andrew talks about here. But grab Andrew. Give him a call. Have him come through that home. He'll give you a detailed step by step of what you need to know about that century home before you're making that investment into that property. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today.
No problem, Adam. Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest, give us a call. My team and my preferred partners will give you the local competitive advantage you need in today's real estate market.